Right. Okay. Welcome everybody. Before we start the meeting, I just want to advise you how the meeting is going to be run. I'm using our standard guide to the agenda provided by our clerk. So obviously everyone's welcome, whether you're in person or online. The way that you indicate to speak is to raise your hand. It's advised not to use the chat, but address the meeting directly, please. And if you're online, keep your microphones and cameras off unless you intend to speak. You only get to speak once during any debate. And when you're finished, turn your microphone off, please. Vote by raising of the hands. And you have to be present in the room for your vote to count. Okay. Yeah, I think they're the basic ground rules. Now, I need to introduce myself. So I'm Councillor O'Regan. I am the Vice Chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. The Chair is Councillor Karim. And before we start, Councillor Karim would like to address the meeting. To which I have no objections. So, Councillor Karim, could you address the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor O'Regan, and thank you very much for standing in as chair for this meeting. I'm currently on holiday, but I'm calling in at the beginning of this meeting to make an important statement. So my statement is, following the meeting of the first planning committee on the 15th of June, I responded to a message from Councillor Brown, who was chairing the meeting. This was after the meeting. I'd mistakenly taken an email chain to be an internal Labour group email, and my response directed to Councillor Brown went out to the planning committee members who were in the email chain. In my response, I made a partisan and inappropriate comment relating to the Conservative Party. On realising my mistake, I apologised to the Conservative members in writing and also wrote to the other members of the Planning Committee to make them aware of my apology. It's incumbent on me to learn from this as a new councillor and ensure that moving forwards I engage supportively, constructively and professionally in all discussions and communications. As chair of the Governance and Audit Committee, I'm committed to conduct my duties in a fair and balanced way. I realise the importance of stating this at this meeting, so I'm calling in whilst on holiday. Thank you for taking my statement. Councillor Karim, signing off.
Thank you very much, Councillor Karim. Your statement is duly noted, and have a great holiday, and looking forward to seeing you again at this committee on your return. Thanks. So let's move to the substance of the agenda. So good evening once again. Normal rules apply to the debate. Okay, so we're going to move to the first agenda item, which is apologies for any absence. So do we have any apologies?
Chair, the only apologies I've had is from Councillor Karim. Everyone else is in the room.
Okay, so we have Councillor Neil, Councillor Ijaz, yes? Yep, there you are. Councillor Haffajee. Who else do we have? How come I haven't got the names of the Conservative people here? So who do we have from the Conservative Party?
Councillor Allen.
Councillor Robertson. Yeah, welcome, Councillor Robertson. And Councillor Allen, welcome very much. Welcome to the committee. Anyone I missed? Yes, sir. Councillor Zebedee. All right, great. Nice to meet you. Nice to have you here. And we have on my right,
Sir Andrew Britton, partner at EY, external audit.
okay, external audit.
Arthur Parker, Chief Accountant at the Council.
And the Chief Accountant. And then we have the Clerk of the Court.
And I'm Lizzie Rich, Clerk to the Governance and Audit Committee. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Right, that's everybody introduced. Okay, let's see. Do you have anyone joining us remotely?
All the committee members are in the room, Chair, but I can see Councillor Hayes is joining as a member online.
Oh,
you.
right, great, thank you. Okay, so
Present.
It's just Councillor Hayes confirming she's present.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, great. So now we move on to declarations of interest. So if any member has a disclosable pecuniary or affected interest, please declare yourself now. No declarations. Great. Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item 3, which is to have a look at the last meeting's minutes, which was held on the 21st of June. Can any member indicate if they have any issue with the accuracy?
Chair, sorry, I'm not a member, but I do have a point of accuracy.
Okay.
Could you use the...
Yeah, of course, sorry.
Yeah.
In the bottom of page 3 of the pack, it says once the 21-22 audit is complete, 22-23 would begin with an interim visit in March 2023. Obviously, that should read March 2024.
Yeah.
Okay. Time travel not being possible.
Not currently, anyway. Okay, I was on holiday at the last meeting. Were there any important actions arising from the minutes? Members of the committee, was there anything? No actions arising. Okay. So let's move on to fourth item.
Oh, Chair, we just need to get the minutes proposed and seconded.
Oh, I see. Of course, yes, indeed. Right. So, would any councillor Allen?
Yeah, can I propose that the minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee held on the 21st of June be accepted as a true record?
Thank you, councillor Allen. Would anyone like to second that motion?
Adrian Hafshi, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, we're going to accept the minutes from the previous meeting. Okay, fourth item, consideration of any urgent items. So, Lizzie, you're to confirm.
Yep, non-notified, Chair.
None, great. Okay, item 5, the external audit. Audit results reports 2020 to 2021 financial statements. So, would the officer responsible like to present the report, please?
Chair, as we're starting off with the audit results report, I'll swiftly pass across to Andrew Britton, who will go through the results of the audit.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Chair. So the report, which starts on, if I just ask members to turn to it's page number 12. I was going to start in terms of the executive summary. I will take the report as read, but just to highlight a couple of items in terms of the 2021, as was discussed at the previous meeting, the 2021 audit was delayed by the delays in the Berkshire Pension Scheme audit, upon which we rely of the work of Deloitte as auditors of the Berkshire Pension Scheme. We have now been able to complete all of our audit procedures following their reports to us, and that's what's contained within the detail of this report. In terms of main points to raise for the committee, we are planning, or we will be issuing an unqualified audit opinion on the financial statements, and also an unqualified value for money conclusion, which is the other area that we report on as external auditors to the council. as it says there, we are still there. In order to complete the audit, we require the receipt of a signed management representation letter, which is included within the appendix to this this particular report, which will be signed by the chair or deputy chair and Stuart as the section 151, and then the signed accounts in order for me to complete the audit report. Included within the included within this report are we highlight to you the audit differences that were both corrected and uncorrected. In terms of the uncorrected ones, you can see they're highlighted on page 15, the differences that were noted, which and as represented also in the letter of representation, those ones that were not corrected are not corrected due to their immateriality to the statements overall. That's management's decision not to correct, and we are happy to accept that decision given the materiality of those amounts. In terms of other areas that we report on, there is nothing other than those matters reported by management in the management's covering report, or indeed in this report, that we believe need to be brought to your attention. But happy to take any questions that members might have on any of the content of the report.
Councillor Robinson.
Hi. Do you have a minor issues document?
Sorry, say again?
Do you publish a minor issues document for this audit? Minor issues document.
Minor issues?
Yeah.
No, this will be the completeness of our reporting on the results. Well, there is a separate report that that we then issue after the completion, or within 3 months of the completion of the audit, which is referred to, it's got a very similar name, the annual auditor's report. The difference in terms of that is there is a bit more detail in relation to the value for money conclusions. Everything that we set out in our audit plan as being need to be brought to the attention of those charged with governance, which is the Governance and Audit Committee for the purposes of Bracknell Council, we would include in here. If it's below the reporting threshold, we don't report it to you. Okay? That's right.
Any other? Right.
Just on the management choosing not to correct the misstatement, so could you elaborate a bit on that, on the rationale behind that, please?
Yeah, of course. And appreciate, as I said last time, that membership of the committee has almost changed entirely since the audit plan was originally presented. But when we present our plan, we explain that we will audit to a level of materiality. That's calculated in the case of the council on the level of gross expenditure that the council puts out. The reason for that is if you look at, obviously, when you look through the accounts and the complexity and the size of some of the amounts in there, if we audited to the penny, I mean, this is ironic saying this is the 2021 accounts, but we would never leave Arthur, and we would always be asking questions. So we set a level of materiality which we report on and say that if that basically is the level at which we believe the accounts represent a true and fair opinion of the council's financial affairs. So as I say, that's set as a percentage. In this case, 2% of the gross expenditure. Then obviously we don't test to that level. We test at a much more detailed level, but everything is in proportion to that. So we would then say, for instance, if there was there becomes sort of like a bit like the minor issues point, there becomes a trivial level below which we think the matters to bring to your attention would be trivial. So we will use materiality to assess the fair and true and fair view on the overall accounts. Then we will have what we refer to as a performance materiality, or a tolerable error, which is within any one line of the accounts the amount that we're willing to accept. And in each and every case of the items listed here, those fell below that level. So we felt that requiring management to change those numbers was not necessary in order to still be able to give a true and fair opinion on the accounts.
Just as a follow-up question, so if there are multiple smaller threshold ones, so would it cumulate to the overall percentage? Like in cases where you have multiple less than 2% ones, which in cumulative would go beyond 2% overall. So how would that?
Yes, is the short answer to that. So when we accumulate all the differences that we identify, obviously, as I say, some of them will be below the level that we think we would ask them to adjust. Some would be below the level which we would consider even reporting, but we would accumulate all the differences we identify. And if there is, for instance, an issue that's identified that is representative of a larger population, we would extrapolate that error and then think about whether that then represented a difference that we would then want to be adjusted. Equally, if there was a thematic reason for the errors arising, we would also then reconsider whether that had had a bearing on our opinion. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Regan. Now I looked through the statements, and I think you're discussing it now. You had some reservations about the accounts somewhere. I'm trying to think where it was. Some figures you wouldn't accept. You feel were accurate. Where was that?
So yeah, agree, Councillor. We were just talking there about why we might adjust or not adjust any errors that we identified or any differences that we identified. The ones that were adjusted, as you could see, I'm just flicking to the right page. That's 33, isn't it?
Is it page 33?
Page 33. So there were some adjustments that happened. They were actually because of the fact that the pension fund themselves adjusted their accounts, and so obviously Bracknell Forest's share of the assets held within the pension fund altered as a result of the audit at the pension fund. So that one was corrected. In terms of the items that weren't corrected, the one related to the valuation of plant, property and equipment, and there were two more that related to the pension fund. But given a materiality, the levels of the materiality that we were working to, those amounts were not material to the financial statements.
Okay, thank you. So if I look at the accounts, I think for the last year this was done, there was a small surplus, and for 2021 there is a small deficit. Is that right? Have I read that correctly?
Chair, can I, before we get into, we've sort of covered off the annual audit results report. Before we get into the financial statements,
Oh,
can
right,
I
okay.
just give a little intro to it before we delve any further?
Sure, please do.
If that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, normally at this point in time I would talk about the outturn position briefly and also the financial health of the council, but we're in a bit of a unique position with the accounts this year because we are talking about the 2020-21 accounts. So we are talking about data that's very historic, so it wouldn't be particularly meaningful to go into a lot of detail on the performance in that year. What I would say is that 2021 was a unique year because it was when the pandemic hit, and obviously that had a big impact on the way the council was run and also on costs. But we did get a lot of support from central government in the way of grants, and there was also a lot of relief granted to business ratepayers as well, which we ended up administering on the government's behalf. But the strong message really is that we did underspend by 3.6 million, which we actually were able to bolster up our general reserves by over £3 million, ending the year with about over 10 million in general reserves. We also had a number of earmark reserves at the year end, so we ended the year in quite a strong financial position, and that would benefit ourselves going forwards. And more relevant is that we just took the 22-23 out-term position to the executive last night, and that position has not changed. We are still in a very strong financial position, in a position that a number of authorities out there would be very envious of. So we are in a good position going forwards to deal with the medium-term challenges. I think the more pertinent question at this point, because we're looking at the 2021 accounts, is really about did we produce a robust set of draft accounts, and did they give a true and fair view of the council's performance? And I think what you're hearing from Andrew is, I would say, definitely yes. In terms of what was actually discovered in the audit itself that was that we had control over, there was only one reportable misstatement identified. That was for the valuation of a community centre, and that was externally valued. And unfortunately, as part of that valuation process, the land area was miscalculated. It's on a site that covers not only the community centre but the primary school. So some of the land area that really related to the school was included in the valuation, and that's what resulted in the error of roughly £2 million. So bearing in mind that the value of property, plant and equipment in the balance sheet is over 600 million, that's not particularly significant, and whether it's in there or not is not really going to affect anybody's opinion of the accounts. So that was one of the reasons. It was below the auditor's materiality threshold, and we didn't consider it material or warranting action either. Also, bearing in mind the lateness of the accounts, if we had changed 2021 accounts, we'd have had to change prior year comparatives in 21-22, so there's a knock-on effect. So it just wasn't really worth adjusting. The other issues that were found were outside of our control. It was really on the pension fund. One of them was changed. The other two were fairly small in terms of the pension fund liability, so again didn't warrant change. And to be honest, the pension fund liability is one of the most volatile items within the balance sheet. It literally changes by 30-40 million pounds up or down from year to year, and you'll find when you get to the 22-23 accounts, that figure's dropped by nearly 100 million. So 2 or 3 million is a drop in the ocean in terms of the volatility of that figure. It's simply because it's a big area, and the value of the liability is linked to corporate bond rates. So the net present value of the liability is based on those rates, and a small change in those rates, literally a 0.1% change in those rates can change the value by between 10 and 15 million pounds. So with the volatility in the market these days, a small change in those rates could literally change the figure by 40-50 million pounds. So it is a snapshot in time, and it will change considerably from year to year. So I think that's probably the main point I would like to make, but happy to take any questions.
Councillor Allen.
This is probably something Andrew might want to comment on. You said it was an unqualified, which is good, as I understand. You might want to can you put that in perspective in terms of how many councils normally get unqualified? Because I know it's quite unusual. I thought it was quite unusual for councils to get an unqualified.
No, not in terms of the financial statements.
Okay.
The financial statements are a qualified financial statements opinion would be unusual. There are some out there, without naming names. The value for money conclusion is more often modified in some way. The modification on the value for money conclusion will often be in relation to one particular area. Just as a reminder, value for money conclusion is not a conclusion on whether what the council is doing is value for money. It's whether it's got arrangements in place to deliver value for money. So quite often the qualification will be on an except for basis, except for the arrangements in relation to X, Y or Z. There is also then some time, so for instance, there were a number of except falls on the financial statements for 1920 councils because of the COVID pandemic. But that's I would say that was that's not strictly a qualification, it's more of a modification as well.
Adrian?
Yeah, these differences that were for 2021, will they be picked up for the next year? What will happen there? Or will they likewise be errors?
The difference with regards to the valuation of that particular property, that has already been reflected in the 21-22 accounts. The differences in relation to the pension fund, obviously that will go through a reassessment at the year end. And as I said, the figure, I can't tell you off the top of my head what the figure is for 21-22, but I can tell you it will be significantly different to this figure anyway, simply because of that process. And as I said, the way it's calculated, and also it will depend on asset performance in terms of the investments as well, which can vary considerably from year to year.
Just following up on that, I think you probably confirmed that the reason it's fixed in the 2021 accounts, or 21-22 accounts, is because that would have been picked up very, very quickly after the end of year, whereas the pension stuff just dragged on for 2 years. So, that would not have been picked up until we got the results from the pension. So the materiality on the property valuation would have been picked up basically during the first audit straight after the end of the year. Is that right?
Can't remember exactly at what point it was picked up, but we either, even if we have already published a draft set of accounts for 21-22, we would just reopen the draft to make the change in the prior year comparatives. No, not in the prior year comparatives, as we didn't restate it, so we would be doing it as part of the overall valuation figure for 21-22.
Okay, any more questions? If not, that's something I'd like to ask about. So the financial statement is obviously looking back to 2021. And as in the report, there are some strategic risks and challenges facing the council. There's a long list there on page 78. I'm just wondering whether the officer would like to comment on these strategic risks and how they might likely affect the financial position of the council going forward. It's page 78. I've got 78 out of 196 pages.
These are in the narrative report, and to be honest, those are risks that we continue to face in the medium term. Obviously, the impact of COVID has subsided, but I mean these are all things that are ongoing things that we are constantly looking at, and obviously have an effect on us, and we budget accordingly. As part of our budget process, we build in a contingency fund to guard against potential risks and issues coming up during the year, and that's one of the ways we deal with them. But a lot of these risks are ongoing, and it's something we constantly reviewing and applying and using as part of the budget setting process, and also during the monitoring of the budget.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that we have some councillors here who are members of other important committees. There may be some items here which They would like some background information on. So my eyes have been lighted on. I think it's the sixth one down. Ensuring children with special education needs receive timely and appropriate support for education where demand is increasing and internal resources are limited.
Yes, that's always any business will have strategic risks that they need to consider as part of that business, and the council is no different to any other business. Obviously, we're trying to provide services to children in the best way we can, but that has to be within limited resources and as part of our general business of trying to run the council as best we can. So there's nothing unique about that, and it's a continuing risk that we try and mitigate in terms of how we run the service.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm looking at this in a positive light, which is showing that the council is aware of risks and challenges, noting those and signalling them and talking about them in the financial statements. So this is very much a living document that we can use to help and manage the council and take it forward based on the mandate that we have as councillors. Thanks.
I think you'll find that the strategic risk register comes to this meeting every 6 months. I think it's due to come to the September meeting, but you'll find that most of these items would have been in that year's strategic risk register. So that's where these items come from. And you'll find that when we do 23-24, the stuff you'll see in September will be in that report. So you'll see that in the next meeting, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Thanks for that.
I was just going to say those were based on the risks that were included in the strategic risk register for 2021, but they're also forward-looking as well. And as Councillor Allen has said, they're constantly under review.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'd like to move recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 as set out in the report. Is that seconded by anybody? Page 61. Page 61.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Would any council like to speak on the motion? No, looks like we're all happy. So we need to take a vote on this, and so if members can indicate by raising their hands if they accept the motion. Thank you. Okay, that appears to be unanimous. I take it we don't need a formal account of votes. It's unanimous.
The vote is enough.
Yeah, that's fine. Good. Right. So moving on to agenda item 7. Is that right? And 6. Yeah, we're on 7. Standards annual report. Would the officer like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm attending remotely. It's Sanjay Prasher, the Borough Solicitor. Apologies for not being present in person. I'm on somewhat of a busman's holiday at the moment on jury service, so I've had to attend remotely. The report itself is not one that requires a vote. It's a report noting essentially. This is a report that comes to Governance and Audit Committee on a annual basis and then to council. It's reflections of the standards regime as it operates within the authority. And by and large, it summarises the standards activity within the last financial year. And by standards activity, I'm referring really to code of conduct complaints, the numbers, and some qualitative data around those. This reports from year to year does include additional information when there are national or local trends that need to be reported. So, for example, a couple of years ago, there was a local code of conduct which was drafted, a model code by the local government association, and this committee was tasked to review whether we needed to change our code of conduct to reflect the model code. We decided we were satisfied with the arrangements that existed already. Now, in terms of the detail of the report itself, the standout feature is probably, if I could take you to the Appendix A, and if I could refer to the actual page references. I apologise. You've got the document in front of you, which is annexed to the page references. So if I could refer you to the table on page 191 and 192, you'll see from that as an authority, we have over a number of years managed, well, I say managed to contain. We've not had a particularly adversarial existence when it comes to complaints. So you'll see they've been in single figures all throughout from 2008-9. The figure does jump to 18 last year, but I have to say that's slightly misleading. And the reason I say that is because I think 13 out of the 18 complaints related to two specific issues brought by two specific individuals. One of those, there were 8 complaints made by an individual who had brought a planning application and who was not satisfied with the way that the planning committee had addressed the application and brought a number of complaints against several members of the committee. None of those were in fact upheld. And we had another 5 complaints made by an individual regarding some correspondence he had entered into with members with one of the party groups where he felt that he hadn't got a reasoned or reasonable response from those members. Again, that was looked into and none of those complaints were upheld. Indeed, as you can see there, none of the 18 complaints were upheld in their totality. The figures do compare favourably with some of our neighbouring authorities. So, for example, in 2021-22, I don't have the more up-to-date figures, but for West Berkshire Council, there were 32 complaints, if I recall correctly, 20 borough complaints and 12 parish complaints. And the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead had 79 in 21-22, according to public records. The other thing I would just like to point out is that all of the complaints in 22-23 were borough complaints. As the monitoring officer, I also received complaints from parish and town councils, but interestingly and perhaps intriguingly, there were no town or parish complaints in 2022-23. Moreover, none of the complaints required investigations, and as I've indicated earlier, none were upheld. I think that by and large reflects the general low-level nature of the complaints we've had over a number of years. We have not had any complaints that have resulted in a hearing, resulting in a formal determination by a code of conduct panel within the borough over the last decade. We have had one in relation to a parish council, but that's all we've had. So essentially, those are the figures. We are clearly updating our training for all new councillors, and we have carried out 2 training sessions. A third is in the pipeline, and that largely covers both the obligations of members under the Code of Conduct, the general obligations regarding not to bully, not to bring the council into disrepute, not to use council resources improperly and a number of others. And it also deals with the issue of declaration of interest and the obligations around those. I, as monitoring officer, I'm very conscious that there is a significantly large new cohort of members. So all of you who are new members will need to be given time to understand and come to terms with those obligations. And whilst the training is discrete training offered at the outset, as monitoring officer, I will be available to answer questions that members have. And indeed, I am pleased to note that a number of members have come to me already in the last couple of months with specific queries, and I certainly would encourage that. But that's all I wanted to say on the report itself. It's fairly self-explanatory, but I am more than happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the report. I'm sorry, I'm playing with my microphone here. I'm still not used to knowing when it's on and when it's not. Thank you very much for the report. Any questions for the officer? Please raise your hands. Okay, we have Councillor Robinson.
Will the report? Sorry, thank you. Will the report be publicly available?
Yes, it will. But it will go to council, and it will be a publicly available report to council. I've been very mindful not to include any specific details about individual councillors, and I wouldn't do that in any case. But yes, the report is shared as a public report when it goes to council, and I understand the next council meeting it can go to will be on the 13th of September.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I have just a general sort of broad question. So I think your report was very comprehensive, but in summary, do you have any recommendations or actions for this committee to adopt or think about going forward?
The code of conduct, thank you, Chair. The code of conduct is a living document, and we are constantly looking to review it. We did have a code of conduct panel working group, which was set up last year to look at the code and to decide whether any amendments were necessary. Moving forward, I don't think at this stage there is anything significant. We've been through quite a significant review. When I say last year, I should say the 21-22 financial year. There may be some changes that need to be made in relation to the Constitution as a whole. The Code of Conduct, of course, sits within the Constitution, and one or two of the issues that have been picked up is that when the code was reviewed in 2017, prior to 2017, where a member had an affected interest, they were required to withdraw from a meeting and would not be able to vote. That was changed in 2017. The protocol for members dealing on planning matters hasn't been amended accordingly, and so I think a decision may need to be taken, or I would say a decision will need to be taken in due course as to whether the planning protocol needs to be amended to bring it up to date with the provisions of the code. At the moment, the planning protocol requires a member of a planning committee who has an affected interest to leave. So you can see there is a slight anomaly there, but it may be that we continue with that anomaly given the specific nature of planning applications and planning committees. But I think that's a decision which ought to be made by this committee, and I will bring a report to this committee along with other constitutional amendments as I would in any financial year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, if I've heard correctly, there isn't actually a recommendation to vote on. Although it says that there is at 2.1. It's just a note, but it's good to. It's just a note, but it's good to have a vote on it, is it? Okay, so I'm going to move recommendation 2.1 as set out in the report. Would anyone like to second that, please?
I can second that.
Okay, and it's Councillor
Zahruddin.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor. I've got going to have a go at pronouncing this.
You can call Naz, that's fine.
No, let's have it. What's your let's have a go. What's your name?
My last name is Zahruddin.
Zahardeen.
Dean, yeah.
Zahardeen.
Yes.
Councillor Zahardeen.
Yep.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for seconding. Okay, all those in favour? Seems to be unanimous to me, Clerk. Would any councillor like to speak to that motion? I guess not. We already voted on it. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Thank you, Councillor Allen, for reminding me you're new and stand-in chairman. Okay, we're all done on that. So I believe this brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. But before I move to a formal close, is anybody would like to contribute or say anything else? Any other business? We're looking all good. Great. Okay, so I'm going to close the meeting and ask that the clerk stop the recording of the meeting.